For a moment. It's 2017, and I just sent the most terrifying message of my entire life to a psychologist. It was a message of pain. It was a message that crammed roughly 15 years of my experience of uncontrolled OCD into a single brief summary, and it was a message above all for help. I was terrified of everything that had to do with psychological therapy. I thought it was going to make me weak. I thought that I would be viewed as less of a person. I just also thought it might change my personality in the long run. Yet so much of that terror was quashed when I got an initial response from the psychologist. It was this response that contained something unexpected. It began with a brief statement where the psychologist actually described how they had once lived with OCD, had learned how to manage it, and now guide others in learning how to manage theirs. It conveyed an understanding of what OCD could have taken from me on some level and what it could stand to take from me. In those brief moments, I felt a true connection to a provider, a true ounce of hope that I could be understood by someone on a level far greater than just textbook factual level, that I could be understood on a deep emotional level. I leaped towards this. I leaped towards something I couldn't even fathom 15 years prior. And I remember the first visit quite fondly. Me on a brown suede couch with enough anxiety to power 3 city blocks for probably 50 years. So it was quite a first visit. But what I remember more so than anything was the provider who was listening to me and the level of empathy that I felt from them as they connected to me through shared experience, through their lived experience, and just overall their perspective. Now, when I say this, it wasn't always overt. Most often it was subtle connections, kind of the understanding that the other person knows what you're talking about, something that only someone else who had dealt with OCD could truly appreciate. And it was these feelings and this empathy that ultimately drove me forward in what would be about a year and a quarter worth of treatment. And it was that empowerment that allowed me to come out on the other side and stand here today. This experience, my experience, is one of many others that I've had the privilege of getting to see, especially now that I am on clinical rotations, that underlies a fundamental duality that exists in medicine. That is the duality of transparent empathy balanced against professional opacity. Transparent empathy meaning simply a provider who accepts everything about themselves and uses their own unique perspectives in order to foster greater connection with patients, other colleagues, whoever it may be. Professional opacity, of course, being the natural boundaries that do need to exist in order to protect us as well as patients. My psychologist walked a fine line between this duality in order to empower me in my treatment. And now I have had the opportunity to do similar to what he had done for me with others, mainly on the clinical rotations in the last few months. So let's talk a little bit about a particular case I had recently on OB-GYN. OB triage, for those who are currently on rotations or have been in the medical environment, OB triage is a very stressful place. Individuals are coming in with a lot of anxiety, and I remember this one case in particular. She came in and I could feel the wall of anxiety immediately hit right as I walked in. And I always like to say that anxiety has different flavors, different spices, and I actually understood hers a little bit similar because she had kind of the laughing type where she was consistently laughing her way through what was clearly something very distressing. And instead of walking into that room and trying to just quickly get through the anxiety so that I could get the history and physical I needed to go present to a resident or anything like that, or trying to kind of brush it aside, I did as we would call, we vibed with it. And essentially we moved along with it and we kind of connected through just conversation built in throughout that physical history and physical exam. And I'll never forget the following day when I went to see her. She actually threw her arms in the air in her bed and was like, "It's you." Anybody who is a med student knows that when we go and see you, the sun does not exist. There's not a lick of light that comes in. Nobody's usually excited to see us in the morning. So it was an incredible experience getting to see that connection. I just recently had a patient that I was working with where in the middle of what was really a long history because it was very complicated, we just started having a discussion about eyesight and how it tends to just seem to want to decline as we get older. And then we just started talking about how there was so many alarms and so much noise going on around us that it felt like we were having to like sonar hone into each other, even though we were directly in front of one another. And those subtle experiences allowed me to connect with these patients, even through just simple mundane things or previous experiences, and see the direct impact it had. And it isn't just me. I was with a wonderful physician during part of my current IM rotation, who in the middle of rounding with a patient was like, "Do you ride motorcycles?" And the patient did. And the connection they fostered immediately was incredible. It was amazing seeing this patient light up and how fascinating it was. And I think this underlies an even more fundamental concept that exists within this duality. And it's that as doctors, we're dealers of facts, but patients are fueled by feelings. Feelings are a backbone to treatment outcomes because our facts are translated into feelings in the patient. And when we don't take the time to account for those feelings, we're missing a major piece of the puzzle. So how do we respect this duality? How do we appreciate the value of feelings in healthcare? Very complex topic, but it comes down to three fundamental things, and then many others as the gray nature of medicine. The first is, as a provider, accepting oneself fully in the experiences we've been through. It's very easy as individuals in this professional field to get down on yourself and to feel you need to be some embodiment of perfection, that you're striving for some sort of goal, some sort of factor that may not be based in reality. We oftentimes view negative things that happen in our lives as negatives that we really shouldn't acknowledge, but in reality we should. That time that you had a fight with your mom, or you had to live with your mother-in-law for 5 years, or a period of time where you had to battle a mental illness. These experiences give you unique perspectives. They give you unique aspects that you can connect to patients with, whether that's subtle, overt, or anything otherwise. It makes you a better provider. It makes you more fit, not less fit. The second is a willingness to share those experiences in an appropriate way. Connecting with patients with experience through your experiences can be very powerful when, of course, the patient is leading it. And it's an opportunity that you think will benefit the treatment outcomes in the long run and bring them further along. Which is why it's important to mention the third point is that this is a balance. This is balanced against our natural professional opacity that we need. If I have a patient who connecting would not be appropriate, or they just want to be heard and they just want to be listened to, then that's what we do. Right? Because the patient is what matters. They're leading this discussion, and we never want to create a situation ever where we're dealing with a provider-dominated environment, because that's what we had in the older days. So, one of the major factors that we always want to consider with this is that it's all about feeling, it's about empathy, and this duality is kind of just the existence of that together. So, when we consider all these variables and we consider this duality and how much feelings matter in healthcare, it is my hope that as we continue to move forward, particularly the medical cohort that I am a part of, that we can continue to provide an unparalleled level of empathetic care to patients. But particularly, I want to see us become more accepting of ourselves in the healthcare setting as the flawed heroes we are. Not the perfect heroes we aspire to be, but the flawed heroes. Because in that sense, we can provide more real empathetic care to our patients, and we can keep that empathy going for years to come. It has been an absolute pleasure getting to present before all of you. Thank you.